Welcome, everyone, to day two of our 3-day nervous system reset. We just get my camera and everything in order here. Make sure it is all set up the way that I need it. Perfect. So, I apologize for the guided meditation is like not wanting to upload correctly. So, I'm gonna figure that out for day one. I had a grounding guided meditation for you all. It is all ready to go, and for some reason, it does not want to upload. So I will get that figured out and I will get it on there for you. But here it is, day two. And yesterday we explored how the nervous system functions, what the basics of it essentially what it consists of and the importance of really grounding to create a sense of safety. And in doing that, it can actually begin the process of shifting our nervous system out of that fight or flight state. So, what we're going to do today is take it a little bit deeper. We are going to look at emotions. We are also going to look at reactivity and why we sometimes feel just so stuck in certain emotions like anger and frustration, and we deal with impatience. And maybe you've experienced this yourself, um, whether a loved one or, you yourself. I know I've been guilty of being quick to get angry or frustrated in certain situations. And it's not unrealistic to think of those, big unexpected changes that can set us off. But what about like the seemingly small things? Your patience feeling a little thinner than usual, or you feel like you could just snap a little easier at your loved ones. People look at you like you have three heads and they're telling you to just relax or calm down, which doesn't always help, right? Maybe a little bit of some extra road rage, perhaps, or even just like this global tension that you notice throughout your body. Like you feel like you really can't fully relax. So you're just kind of keyed up all the time and you're really quick to snap back at somebody. The thing with this is, it isn't just a mindset issue. It's a nervous system issue. It goes deep. When your nervous system is in a state of dysregulation, your body is primed for that survival mode, right? We talked about this yesterday. So that means that any perceived threat, whether it's an actual danger or not, so, a bear is coming at you in the woods, or it's just a stressful email, or someone cutting you off in traffic, that ends up triggering a really rapid response. And I think the best way to often get to the bottom of something and begin to make those lasting changes is by educating and really understanding the why and the how behind something. So let's take a quick look at exactly what is happening internally when we have those quick responses. So your amygdala, this is a specific area of the brain. It's the fear center of the brain. And this goes on high alert when you are in this survival mode. So your body perceives those everyday stressors as threats, even though we really know that they aren't. But because of this, it actually makes small irritations feel much, much bigger than they actually are. We also have an increase in those stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. So, this alone, just having an increase of those hormones, will cause us to react more quickly and aggressively rather than pausing to process everything. So these hormones reinforce the cycle of survival mode. So it keeps us in that state of hypervigilance and always ready to defend itself. So whenever someone cuts you off in traffic or They want to kind of pick at you and start an argument with you. And you want to just jump right back in and fight back. That's the sympathetics kicking in. You can't just let it go because your brain is releasing all of the hormones and telling you to fight for your life. That you have to come out on top and you have to defend yourself. The other piece of this is looking at our emotional frequencies. So our emotions carry different energetic frequencies that correlate with nervous system states. So lower frequencies like fear and shame and anger and frustration will actually keep the body in that heightened stress state, making calm and patience harder to access. So there is a chart that I'm going to have in your workbook for you, and you're going to see in that chart that there's a big range, but I've just kind of taken a little snippet out to show you in there. But at 100 to 150 hertz, that is that fight or flight state. And then you can move up in the chart, and you're going to move up to anger and frustration, and that's also going to be a fight or flight state. Then we have stress and anxiety. So we're going up 200, 250 hertz. That's more of a hypervigilance. And then we have neutrality, which is around 250 hertz, and that's balanced regulation. Then we start to move up to gratitude, which is about 500 hertz. And that's when we really start to see the triggering of the parasympathetic state. Then on top of that is love and compassion, and that is the state of deep relaxation and healing. So everything in the universe is operating on vibration and frequencies. And when we talk about emotional frequencies, this is what we mean. So the measurable vibrational energy that different emotions emit. Okay, so we can actually measure emotions and those frequencies that impact our nervous system, that impact brain activity and overall well-being. So that measurement itself is in hertz. That is a unit of frequency. And a lot of this work comes from Dr. David Hawkins. He really is the one that came up with this scale and what you see in your workbook pages. And it goes further, much further in depth, and there are a lot of different measurements. But the higher frequency emotions like love, peace, compassion, those are the ones that are going to support healing. While the lower frequency emotions like shame and guilt, fear, anger, those are linked to stress and disease. So these influence us. If we are in an environment that guilts you or you feel fearful of your situation, it is only going to reinforce those triggering survival states. And after a while, we will just experience a nervous system fatigue because when we're stressed for a long period of time, we just don't have the energy reserves to pause before reacting. So we're really quick to anger or kind of snap back. And we may regret it later, or we may not even recall how that was our reaction. It really just depends upon the state of our nervous system. So, unprocessed emotions like past traumas or other stressors that just haven't been resolved, the body can actually hold on to those as stored tension. And that can then surface later at other times as irritability, impatience, or anger. And there's a great book called The Emotion Code, which really dives into this. There's another one called The Body Keeps Score. So if you want to dive more into that, we'll do that within the Neurobalance Tribe, but you can also check those books out as well. Now, Another consideration is that if your body is constantly scanning for threats, you'll respond in a really defensive manner to even the most minor triggers because you are lacking safety signals. And this is one of the biggest reasons we struggle with stress, emotional activity, and chronic tension because we are missing those internal and external cues that tell our body, hey, it's okay. Like you are not in danger. But the good news is you don't have to stay stuck in this reactive cycle. So you can retrain your nervous system, which is what we are working on here, right? Now, breath work has gained more attention recently as a way to help you regulate your system, but it's been around for a while, just kind of gaining a little bit more attention on social media, I think. But there's also some other options as well, and really a super easy and simple way is to just shake. Just shake your body. And officially, it's called neurogenic tremoring. And animals actually naturally do this. They're essentially kind of shaking off stress after a fight or flight situation. But humans will suppress this response. We feel like we want to run from a situation, but we know that culturally it's not appropriate. So we feel maybe like our boss is scolding us and we're fearful and we just want to run away and hide. But society has said that's an inappropriate response. So we just kind of suppress it. And what that does is it actually further reinforces that sympathetic drive. So you can actually just simply stand up and you start to shake your arms, your legs, your torso, for like 1 to 2 minutes. Now, don't injure yourself, okay? But don't just do like a little weak little shake. Like get into it. Shake it off. Give your body a good, purposeful shake. But again, don't injure yourself. Don't make yourself dizzy, okay? But get the movement going. Another thing that you can do is something called progressive muscle relaxation. This is where you start at your feet and you just kind of tense each muscle group for about 5 seconds and then release. So, say with your hands, you just tighten your hands as tight as you can and then release. And then you're going to work your way up your body. So, if you start with your feet and you tense them and then release. And then with your legs, tighten your legs and then release. With your glutes, tighten them tight and release. Work all the way up. This is a great one to do when you don't really have the space for shaking or it's not appropriate with where you are, or you can't shake. Say, you're having to sit in a chair, taking an exam, and you feel this nervous energy. This can actually help to release stored tension and reset your system in the moment. Now, some other things that you can do are some acupressure points. One point is called liver 3. It's actually on the very top of the foot between the big toe and the second toe. So if you feel between the big toe and the second toe and you feel up into the knuckle, it'll be a little bit further up on the point on the foot. Again, this point will be shown in your workbook, but you can use this point, and it's actually a fantastic point to help release anger. So that's liver 3 between the big toe and the second toe. And one thing I do want to point out too before I go any further is that in Chinese medicine, there is actually a connection between emotions and the organs. Anger is associated with the liver, um, joy with the heart, worry with the spleen. You have grief with the lungs, and fear goes with the kidneys. So when I treat patients, this is a consideration that I make, especially in instances where patients are kind of plateauing in care. I look at what is their emotional state and how has it affected them. So if they've been dealing with excessive anger for a long period of time, whatever that cause was, it can actually end up damaging the liver and lead to liver disease. If they have excessive headaches or irritability, excessive worrying can damage the spleen, and that's going to cause digestive issues. They're going to be constantly fatigued. It's also going to reinforce that overthinking portion. And then you have something like grief, which affects the lungs. And so this is often why those that have suffered losses, say the death of a close loved one, they often end up with a flare up of asthma, or they start to deal with like a cough or the flu afterwards. And that's all because they're still trying to process that grief. And I've seen people that, their spouse of 40 years passed away and they're having a hard time processing that and kind of moving through this new chapter, this new stage of life, and they are just constantly sick all of the time. They have very low immunity, and a lot of that has to do with the grief that they've never really fully processed. It's kind of gotten stuck in their system. So adding in some acupressure points can be helpful to kind of jumpstart this process. So we talked about liver 3. There's also heart 7, which is a fantastic calming point. It's right in the crease, the wrist crease, in line with the pinky finger. So this is really good for calming kind of those racing thoughts. It helps to reduce anxiety and promote balance. Another one of my favorite things to do is sound frequencies and vibrational healing. Whether it is a traditional sound bath with crystal bowls, if you're using Tibetan or Himalayan bowls, gongs, or other musical instruments, or if you're just listening to specifically tuned music, such as that harmony frequency of 432 hertz or the love frequency at 528 hertz, or there's even the 741 hertz, which helps to clear emotional blocks and also helps you process anger and frustration. And there's also binaural beats, which is great. But just remember with those, you really need to be using headphones to get the most out of them. Doesn't quite work the same if you don't, because the idea is to get the brain communicating with itself in a different way. So if you're hearing them with both ears at the same time, it doesn't quite work the same as headphones in. Another amazing tool that we actually talked a bit about yesterday are essential oils. And in your workbook pages, there will be a list of frequencies and certain oils, but lavender and frankincense are great, and especially rose. So rose is one of the highest frequency essential oils. So having that on hand can be fantastic. And again, you can diffuse these in your space. You can apply it topically or just, put a few drops in your hands and smell, inhale out of your hands or directly from the bottle. Now, other movements like dancing, Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, all of those are also beneficial, along with gratitude practices. So you're going to see today's action step includes an exercise for gratitude and essentially heart coherence that will help to provide an instant frequency shift as well as some breath work. So you'll see that info come through in the group as well. Again, I wanted to keep those videos separate from these chats so that you can more easily reference back to them and just repeat those practices whenever you wanted to. I also want to mention that things like talk therapy can be very helpful for many people that need to release those stuck emotions. Um, so the tools that we're talking about here can be a great addition to that. But I also want you to consider that traditional talk therapy may also not be the answer for everyone. For some people, talking about past experiences over and over and over again doesn't actually heal them, but rather what it's doing is reinforcing the emotional and psychological stressors, those stress responses that were tied to those experiences. Trauma and chronic stress aren't just stored as memories, but they're stored in the nervous system, in the body tissues. So when you're talking about those past experiences and you're bringing it back up, that can end up activating the same stress response, which can then re-trigger the body's survival mechanisms rather than actually resolving them. So sometimes people think like, oh, I think I have some stored and unresolved emotions in there, and I need to start digging in deep and figure out exactly where they come from. And that can sometimes make it worse. So know that we don't always have to deep dive into every crevice to figure it out. We just need to release it and get it out. So, doing things like somatic therapy and breath work or other nervous system regulation exercises can be extremely beneficial because it will help the body to release that stored trauma physically and not just intellectually. There we go. So, when we replay those painful events repeatedly, the brain doesn't necessarily know the difference between remembering the experience and reliving it. So, those neural pathways of trauma can actually strengthen in some individuals rather than dissolve. So, that's where other reframing techniques like neuro linguistic programming, EMDR, or even hypnosis can help the brain to create new meaning and associations instead of just reinforcing patterns. It's kind of going back and telling yourself a new story, a new ending as to what happened. But over analyzing, overthinking, this can actually create a loop of analysis paralysis where you understand your patterns, but you can't really shift out of them. So sometimes instead of analyzing our past and really trying to like dig deep, we actually just need to learn to stay in the body and be present, kind of reducing our attachment to those painful stories, things that happened to us, things that we experienced, because those things are not who we are. Just like a condition or a disease is not who we are. But so many of us end up taking on that story and labeling ourselves with it. But that's not true. It's false. It's not our identity. So I encourage you to go about these next few days and into the coming week not necessarily needing to find a reason for why your nervous system is in the state that it's in. You don't have to go digging up the past to figure out why things are the way they are. Sometimes as you go through this process, things will kind of come to the surface and you'll go, oh, that's why. Or you start to become more observant about your environment and you start seeing things in your environment in a different way. And perhaps it's, family dynamics, and you start to see the way that certain family members interact with each other, and a light bulb goes on, and you go, wow, like that's actually reinforcing things. And that starts to happen because you're breaking the cycle, you're breaking the loop. You are changing your nervous system. So just understand that there's a series of programs that were ran before you got to this point, the point at which you consciously became aware that there was an imbalance within your nervous system. And now you're going to have the tools to change that. So I want you to consider something. The way that you act and the way that you behave is due to a set of programs. And those programs have been running since you were born. So 20, 30, 40, 50 years or more. And some of those programs that are running, you never even consciously agreed to have installed. So think back to your earliest memory. For most of us, it's around 4, maybe 3 years old, and it's often a bit spotty. So say your earliest memory is at 3 years old. So that means there is a good 2 to 3 years that you have no recollection of. What happened during that time? I mean, aside from what family members have told you, who were the people that you interacted with? What was the environment you were living in? What were the conversations had around you? Do you remember? Do you know? Are you aware of all of that? Probably not. Think of the phrase, kids are like sponges, right? And that's due to certain brainwave states, which we also dive deeper into that inside of the neurobalance tribe. But one particular brainwave state is called theta. And as kids, we live in this state a lot. And we're primarily in that brainwave state up till around the age of 7. Not only does it help to provide us with a great imagination, but it helps us to absorb information. We can't possibly learn how to pick up all the societal norms and learn everything from one-on-one instruction. So we observe. We see that daddy talks to the policeman differently than he does to the grocery store clerk. And we see how mother interacts with the neighbors or the people that cut her off in traffic. Right? So we constantly observe the world around us and we create belief systems and moral codes based on what our environment is showing us. And that leads to a certain set of behaviors that then develop over time. And this is why I say that we can end up being programmed with systems that were never ours to begin with. Our relationships and views on money, um, romantic relationships, our thoughts on career and travel, those may not always be our own. They can be absorbed and passed down through families. So, stopping to think why you might react in a certain way or have a certain viewpoint on something can be helpful. But generational trauma is a real thing too. And it's trauma that's never really been dealt with, emotions that have been, stuck there. And it literally gets encoded into the familial. I'm having trouble today, y'all. Familial DNA. Okay, so it gets coded in there, and that ends up affecting family members down the line. So there is so much more that we can dive into here. But if this is the kind of information that's resonating with you, I recommend that you consider taking a look at the Neurobalance Tribe. So this is a community where we're really diving deeper into not only what we've talked about so far these past couple of days, but also providing you tools that you need to make substantial changes in the long term. those tools that are going to be beneficial for you. We're walking you through how to use them. And it's really a guided process that takes you through everything. So education is really, I think education is very powerful. So that's what we're focusing on is kind of understanding the why behind how things work and then taking those tools and learning how to implement them on a daily basis to make gradient sustainable changes in your life. So as we wrap up today, I want you to keep an eye out for um, the updated workbook that will have the action steps in there for you today. And just remember that it may be easy to default to things like anger and frustration and impatience and stress or overwhelm, but you're not stuck this way. That does not have to be your identity. That does not have to be who you are. You can make changes at any time. It may not always be easy, but it is completely possible. Your system can be trained to shift from stress to regulation at any time. So take a moment to honor the work that you've done today and remember that healing is always a journey, but you are already making powerful shifts. And remember, as always, drop in the comments where you're watching from, any insight that you've had or questions. I would love to hear from you. I'll see you on day 3.